Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we are getting back to the basics and we are talking about block removal. This is such a huge foundational piece to practicing your psychic ability. It's so important. It's basically the first thing that you're going to learn when you enter into my psychic development course. But I want to give you guys the basics here and just know that if you want even more resources, there is my course. It's down below. You guys can sign up for that. And I will have a masterclass course coming soon. If it's already out, it's down below. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about what blocks are kind of the common ones that we often see and then how to remove them. So stick around. We're going to cover a lot of information in today's video. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Lauren. I am all about psychic development and teaching you guys how to tap into your psychic abilities even more. So I have tons of free videos here on YouTube. I have courses. I also do readings. So stick around, subscribe to my channel if you want to see more tips on how to strengthen your abilities. So whether you are reading for yourself or for other people, knowing how to remove blocks to your psychic ability is so incredibly important. And let's think about it this way. When we connect with an intuitive source, a psychic source, whatever you believe in, spirit guides, God, the universe, think of it as sort of being this energy above you. And think about your psychic ability as kind of this pipe that leads from you to this psychic source. And this is how you communicate, is between this pipe. And this is how information comes back and forth. Now, if that pipe is clogged, then you're not going to be able to communicate as well with that psychic source. The information that comes through might be incorrect. It might not be clear. It might not come when you want it to come. And this is why a lot of people don't have very honed psychic abilities, is there's probably a lot clogged in that pipe. Now, that is a symbolic representation. That is not literally how it works. But I just like that visualization. It kind of helps me understand whenever I say I need to be a clean and clear vessel, I'm kind of visualizing that pipe in my head and I'm focusing on any blocks that might be in my way. Even if you're just reading for yourself, I think it's important to clear out this block, clear out any blocks that you might have, because it does influence how you read yourself, and again, that accuracy and the consistency of the information that comes through. But it also is probably things that you need to deal with anyway, and it'll probably only help you in your mental health anyways. All right, so what are psychic blocks? Psychic blocks are mental beliefs that you have that inhibit you from receiving psychic information. Now, the one thing I want you to take away from this video, if there's anything that you take away from it, is that these psychic blocks can be removed. They are placed there, they might have been externally placed or you might have kind of placed them, but don't let anyone tell you that they can't be removed or that they're outside of your control. There's this belief that sometimes psychic blocks are put on you, you can't remove them, and it's all just kind of like out of your control. And I really want us to get into the mindset of understanding that this is all just mental. These are the things you tell yourself in your head of why you can't connect, and we can get rid of those through just a simple affirmation, simple acknowledgement, or it might require a little bit more work. But the point here is that you can get rid of them. They are not something out of your control. Really, when it comes down to it, this is like our self-inner talk. That's what psychic blocks are. So blocks can be internal, external, and then they can also be physical or mental. So these mental beliefs can be internal or they can be external. And when I say that, it could be that externally somebody told you something about psychic ability and it really got to you and you're like, oh darn it, that was awful. And now I have a block and I can't receive psychic information. Even though that person placed that thought there or might have given you that thought, it's on you at the end of the day to realize I'm the one holding on to it. It's not their fault. Like, yes, it might have been originally, but it's more my fault for hanging on to it. So that's kind of what I mean when we are trying to identify what they are. There might be some external blocks that come through, but at the end of the day, whether or not you chose to take them on is yours, and therefore I feel like most blocks are internal. So internal blocks, again, are those things that you say to yourself. Maybe you told yourself, I don't believe in the psychic ability, and because of that belief, you have a harder time opening up your psychic ability. I'm going to go through a lot more examples here in a second. Now, when I talk about physical, internal, or external blocks, I'm really just categorizing this to help you guys, just so you can put a name to it, because sometimes being able to label it helps you identify it better. So when I talk about like an internal physical block, it could just be as simple as you don't feel good, you have a migraine. It's a lot harder to read when you have a migraine. Like, you're probably not going to read at all. And so that's what I mean when we have like something internally physically going on that might be blocking our psychic ability. This can also be like certain disorders that people have. That's a whole nother can of worms. But then when we talk about like external physical blocks, like I think of this as, okay, you're in a space that is way too loud, way too noisy, way too whatever, and you're having a hard time reading because the external stuff is bothering you. That might bleed into a little bit of like, how much of that are you like telling yourself you can't do it because it's too noisy? But at the same time, there are things that can affect you that just make you feel a little bit off. Am I suggesting you read in a really noisy place all the time? No, but there's ways you can control that, but also at the end of the day, sometimes you can't control those outside influences, and you have to be able to learn how to power through it if you are a practicing psychic. Again, though, with all of these blocks, it's a matter of mindset. So if you let it bother you, it's going to bother you. Now, for the most part, when we talk about psychic blocks, usually it's just feeling like you cannot access psychic information. But sometimes it can also come across as like triggers, like a trigger would, I should say. So maybe you like freeze up, maybe you get really nervous, maybe you get really anxious. So it can kind of make you feel overwhelmed or like not good enough, or you start to freak out because all of a sudden your mind is just blank and you can't pick up anything. And so normally when that happens, that might be a psychic block, not all the time, but that's just how I identify it sometimes, is usually just kind of like an emotional reaction, a trigger to something that's happening that I probably need to pay attention to and see what's really going on under the surface. So now you probably understand a little bit about why you need to focus on these and how it can kind of inhibit your readings, the ability to read yourself or others. And then at the core too, there probably is something else going on that needs to be addressed, and there's no harm in addressing it. So let's get into actual like examples, and I want to talk about the common ways that I see psychic blocks show up. Now I'm probably going to miss a bunch because they're unique to you. They're unique to your experience, your past, the things that you've gone through. So the important thing here with all of this is to first identify the block and then try to figure out how to get rid of it. So we're going to just talk about identifying what it is. And so I'm going to throw out some examples and maybe this will help you. Now, to help categorize these a little bit better, first I'm going to talk about childhood blocks. So childhood blocks are things that happen in your childhood that kind of influence your psychic ability. And I feel like this is where most of us have to start when we're first learning, because usually this comes from something that somebody said to you, or your belief about your abilities, or even religious backgrounds of like how you were raised. And so there can be a lot of things in your mind that happen when you're a child that kind of have stuck with you this whole entire time that you kind of have to address and let go of. Now, I actually have a whole video on my personal childhood blocks, if it helps you at all. And just because you had a childhood where you didn't have any psychic abilities doesn't mean you didn't have blocks around it. And that's kind of how I was. But you could have also had, psychic experiences, and your family or your friends could have told you, hey, that's weird, that's wrong, like, you're scary, you're freaking me out. And then you could have had this like underlying thought here the whole time of like, oh, my psychic abilities make me scary. Having these abilities is wrong or incorrect. And sometimes you might not know that those thoughts are there, but when you start to uncover them, you'll start to realize how much they actually are influencing your readings. Childhood abuse as well could absolutely cause blocks. So that could be physical, emotional abuse, anything negative that might have happened in your life we want to look towards those to see if there's anything that could have caused us to not have faith or trust in our psychic abilities. When this starts to kind of cross over into religious beliefs, you might have been told that you're going to go to hell, or that doing this work is something that attracted demons or made you sin. Childhood blocks could also come from like TV. It could come from media. You could have watched a movie and believed that, oh, if I talk to ghosts, they're going to take over my body. And you might have all these fears around that. So there's a lot of underlying fears that we might have been trained to have that we might not even realize, that I find often pops up in the middle of a reading, or maybe just even on your own time. And you're like, okay, that's a fear that I have, and that fear is not allowing information to come through. There could also be fears too of just your family disowning you, and that could be a fear that you even have now. Of like, if I do this psychic work, if I do intuitive work, my family will think I'm weird. My friends will think I'm weird. They will disown me. That can become a psychic block in itself, because you're saying essentially that your psychic ability is not allowed here. It's not allowed in your life because of what other people say or do. And therefore it's not to be trusted. It shouldn't be like dealt with or encouraged. It's a bad thing. Now, I already touched a little bit briefly on like physical blocks. So again, that could just be that you're not feeling good. I've talked about this in other videos about how if I'm not getting enough sleep, if I'm not eating well, like it will make me feel sick, or I will feel physically too tired to do a reading as well as I could if I'm awake, if I'm alert, if I'm taking care of my body. So that's a huge one that I would say. If I don't get enough sleep, like my brain cannot function even at the basic level to be able to do anything, much less, actually do a psychic reading. Physical blocks could also be disorders like schizophrenia. There's people also that like can't visualize things in their mind. I feel like that's called aphantasia. If I'm wrong, I'll correct myself. But there's disorders that can inhibit certain clairs. That does not mean though that you cannot be psychic, that you cannot access your psychic abilities in different ways. It just might mean that it's a little bit harder for you. I'm gonna kind of leave that there. There's a whole nother can of worms that we can open, but I'm doing my research on that, and I'd like to eventually one day make a video on what's the difference between schizophrenia and psychic abilities and all of that. But jumping back to some of the external psychic blocks that we might see, again, it's somebody else telling you that you weren't good enough or something, or that your psychic ability sucked. One that I had to really work through was I had somebody tell me that I was too young to read, and therefore I wasn't a good reader. And so I had to really work through that one and release that and not let it keep bugging me to the point that I wasn't able to read. One that I often see that I don't like is people saying that they feel like they're being psychically attacked. I don't like that word. I feel like it's a buzzword that psychics use to kind of like, I don't know, lure people in to maybe sell them services. I feel like, again, psychic attacks are one of those that if you really believe it, if you give it power, then absolutely, you're blocking yourself. But that's the thing. It's you doing it to yourself, not the other way around. You have ultimate control over your energy and your bubble. Even if somebody, yes, did something to psychically attack you and I'm wrong, you have the power at any time to cleanse yourself, to reset your bubble, to, do a meditation, to clean and clear your aura, your energy, your pipe. And so I feel like that is an excuse. I'm sorry. It's not going to be a popular opinion, but I do feel like that's an excuse to letting someone else have power over your psychic abilities. So I don't like the word psychic attacks. I think what they are essentially is you just giving your power away to somebody else. So to me, a lot of these psychic blocks are, again, more about getting out of the victim mentality, getting out of this sense of like, I don't have control, into I trust my psychic abilities, I can control it, I can turn it on, I can turn it off, and not letting those fears bother you. Another thing that I see often of like an external block is like a psychic saying that it's their client's fault. I can't connect because they're doing XYZ. And one of the things that I try to teach in my advanced course is kind of how to work through those problematic clients, because you should be able to read anyone and anything. There might be more challenging people, obviously, but you can't let those blocks come up and kind of get in your way of doing that reading, especially if you're like a paid psychic and, you need to deliver on your services, basically. You're allowed to make mistakes, you're allowed to be wrong, but at the same time, I want you guys to feel like you have the resources here on my channel to push yourself to be a better psychic. And that's where we get into where I feel like the majority of our blocks come from. And that's just like the mental, emotional blocks. Or maybe it's just like a fear or a misunderstanding of how this all works that could be influencing your thoughts. It could be something totally random and silly that has absolutely nothing to do with your psychic ability at all. Or it could be a big kind of traumatic event that happened that you still need to do some work around. And I'm definitely not saying you will be perfect overnight. I do believe that to some extent you can set these things aside and read anyway. But I do think that you can sort of work with them, get rid of them. On a lot of levels, this is sort of akin to shadow work. Another common psychic block I see is monkey mind. It's when you really can't shut off that monkey mind chatter and really get like quiet in your mind to be able to receive psychic information. That's a pretty big one when you're first starting out. I feel like a lot of blocks can also come from doing readings, unfortunately. Like you might have a client that said something to you like, oh, that's wrong, or you're not right, or, they could have just been not the nicest, and that could have stuck with you in the back of your mind. Or maybe you just kind of have bad self-esteem in general, or maybe life isn't that good. And sometimes when you're depressed or anxious or have all these other things going on, it's hard to clear out that pipe to be able to access that psychic source. So this is why I always encourage you guys to be healthy psychics, to take care of yourself first before reading somebody else. If you are not a clean and clear vessel, you're not going to be able to deliver better information to yourself or to others. Now, one thing I do remember asking my coach way back when I was learning was, what if you think you have a psychic block, but you don't know what it is? Is that enough to block you? And I remember her laughing and being like, yeah, it definitely could be. And so that is actually something I do see often with people, is sometimes they're like, I don't know if I have a psychic block. And then they block themselves because they don't know if they have one, and they just think they have one, but they can't identify it. The opposite of this too is people who are in denial, people who think that they have absolutely no blocks, no problems whatsoever, and they're perfect and they're completely clean and clear. That can be a block as well. I would say it's a block of denial. What are you denying? That's kind of where I would start with that. Usually at the core of it, when I work with a lot of you guys, when I coach a lot, it seems to be a lack of self-confidence around your psychic abilities. And this is kind of something that you have to trick your mind into doing. You have to say, I trust my psychic abilities. I believe in them. I believe in myself. They're gonna work for me. They are working for me. I am psychic. I feel like when it comes down to it, we just need a little bit of reassurance and encouragement. And sometimes that's enough to get rid of a block. So let's get into removing those blocks. Now, with all of these, again, first you have to identify that emotion, kind of like what's coming up, what am I feeling? And then you have to ask, where is that coming from? Was that a certain person? Was that something I said to myself? Was it a situation? If you can't exactly pinpoint why, it's okay. You can still get rid of that block. Sometimes it helps to not even go there and give it that energy. But then what you want to do is do block removal techniques. And I will say that at the very basic level, you can think away a block. Like you can just say, I release you. I'm not going to let this bother me anymore. And it can be gone like that. And I think that when we try to give it more power and we feel like we have to do all these rituals or go see somebody to have something done to us, like you again give it more of that power. But if you keep telling yourself like, I'm not going to let this bother me, I'm going to release it, sometimes that's just enough. It really is. So that is my first block removal technique, is simply setting the intention that it's not going to bother you anymore, that it's not going to block you anymore, and release it. And it could be as simple as that. Now, I do know that that doesn't always work. I feel like that works for the menial little stuff. But sometimes we need to do a little bit more work around it. The second block removal technique that I would give you guys is to just educate yourself. This is really helpful if you're just learning and you're new to kind of this whole psychic ability stuff. I feel like when you understand how the psychic ability does and doesn't work, and you kind of have this new understanding to replace the false information that you have around the psychic ability, that alone can actually help you a lot to remove those blocks. Now, that's one of the big reasons why I have this channel here, is because I want these resources to be available to you guys, and I want a lot of it to be free so you can start your journey, feel educated, and work through these blocks right away. The next block removal technique is probably the one I go to next if I can't just like release it. And this is just to do some basic like journal work, like write about it, kind of write out your emotions, like this is what I'm feeling, but I'm going to leave it here on the paper. It's never going to bother me again. So maybe I have a belief that my psychic ability doesn't work when I want it to work. And so I can put that down on my journal, and I can turn it into an affirmation of I can access my psychic ability anytime that I want. And you can start to put those on sticky notes. You can put them around your house. You can put them in alarms on your phone to where the alarm goes off, where you have to read it, and you have to read it all throughout the day. So that's kind of like the basic work that I might do around it. I feel like for me, journaling, intention setting, affirmations, and just kind of retraining my mind to think about it a different way is super helpful for me. Another block removal technique that you can do is to listen to hypnosis or meditation tracks. There might be, I do know I have one a block removal meditation. I want to actually come up with some more, so I will have more soon. But you can listen to a specific psychic block removal meditation. Sometimes those are a little harder to find, again, which is why I want to create them. But if you know it's around something in specific, like if you know there was a person in your life that is causing this block and you really just need to get them out of your mind, you could do a cord cutting meditation with this person. If you are having a lot of fears around money, for example, and somehow that's blocking your psychic ability, which it absolutely can, if you're constantly worried about making money that you're not getting into your psychic ability, then you can look up meditation specifically around money and releasing that. So it could be more specific to your block, or it could just be about like psychic blocks in general. And I will link my waterfall meditation block removal up above. Now, the next thing that you can do to remove blocks is to get physical. Not a lot of people like to do this, but sometimes going outside, getting a breath of fresh air can be so helpful. Putting your feet in the grass, hugging a tree, even on a more, on a body work level of like getting Reiki, going to Qigong, doing yoga. Sometimes I feel like a lot of people really, maybe the block is kind of physical related. And so doing that body work or getting more in touch with their body helps them actually get more in touch with their psychic ability. So that can absolutely be a thing, especially if you're anxious or you're depressed or you're inside a lot. Sometimes you really just kind of need to take care of your body first, and that will help you inevitably remove those blocks. One thing that absolutely helps me, and maybe this is just because I'm a Virgo, but organizing or cleaning up my house or my home absolutely helps me with my psychic ability. I find that when my mind is cluttered, my home is usually cluttered as well. So sometimes it helps me to know, okay, my house is clean, I don't have to worry about that, and then I can come back to my psychic abilities a little bit better. Or it's just the process of cleaning. You can also set the intention that as you're cleaning up or reorganizing your home, or even just your reading space, you can set the intention that you're also cleaning up your psychic ability. So setting the intention at the same time can definitely help. One of my favorite ways to actually remove blocks, and I feel like I do this a lot unintentionally, is to use water, and specifically doing showers, baths, and washing your hands. And so the key here is to, as you are taking a bath, as you are taking a shower, imagining that water washing away any of those blocks, any of those things that are bothering you. It's no longer bothering you. This water is going to wash it away. And I love doing that in the shower. I sometimes take it to the next level with like a ritual bath, and I'll put specific herbs and things into a bath. Epsom salt is supposed to help really well with this. I think that all comes down to your intention. If you decide it helps, it's going to help. You can even add aromatherapy to that. One of the ways I was taught when I was learning too was that if you don't have the the ability to just go take a shower in between clients, is you can get up, go to the bathroom, and wash your hands. And sometimes as you're doing that, you set the intention that you're washing off that person's energy. You are not letting it affect you anymore, but you can also do that with any sort of blocks that come up. And so sometimes I'll do this if at the end of the day, maybe I had a difficult reading, I'll just be like, all right, I'm not going to think about that person anymore or their reading. I'm just going to let it go. You know, I'm not going to let that block me, if that makes sense. Now, I have not done this personally, but I do know that a lot of people use tapping as a way to also remove blocks. So I think that's essentially tapping certain spots of your body to basically reset your thinking, reset your body around a certain, you know, something that you're trying to shift, something that you're trying to inwardly say that's different to get yourself kind of out of that old thinking. Mantras are another thing that you can use. You can find a lot of people like Sanskrit mantras that are very specific and you say them a certain way. And you can even do like long meditations with them to really kind of let them sink in. You can also make up your own mantras and just kind of say them to yourself throughout the day. You can put them in your phone and have them to basically combat any sort of feelings that you're having that might be causing psychic blocks. Dream work is also a really fun way to get rid of psychic blocks. Dream work is also a really fun way to sort of get through psychic blocks. Especially if you might not know what they are, you can ask for your spiritual team to basically communicate with you in dreams, try to help identify them. I think that this works well if you dream often. It might be a little harder if you're not so good at dreaming. But in my psychic dream video, I will discuss this a little bit more. If working with the chakras resonates with you, you can kind of individually work on the chakras. Maybe they might be associated with a certain block. You can get Reiki to kind of clear out your aura, clear out your chakras. Just know that I feel like a lot of people feel like they have to cleanse their chakras in order to remove psychic blocks, but that's not always the case. Like if you don't resonate with that image of how your energy flows and works, you're not missing anything. Like I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, well, I have to balance my chakras because so-and-so told me. But I feel like that can become a block in itself. If you don't resonate with energy in that way, you don't have to resonate with it. It's okay. But if you do resonate with the chakras, working with them and cleaning them out, maybe doing a chakra meditation, again, Reiki, those might actually help you kind of feel a little bit clearer and cleaner, almost like physically. Now, if you want to get more onto the ritual side of things, I will say that you can use candles, you can use tools from other religious practices. You don't have to practice that religion necessarily to do the things that they do. Obviously, educate yourself, learn as you go. But one of the things that you can do under the shamanic umbrella is you can do a soul retrieval if you believe in that kind of thing. And then, if you really like the Wiccan stuff, you can also look up witchcraft practices. You're not necessarily a witch just because you do a spell candle, but you can use them as a way to just kind of further make you feel like you are setting the intention that you are removing that block. Another thing you can use to remove blocks is tarot cards, oracle cards. I feel like I use this a lot when I'm emotional, but I don't understand why. Like, what's going on here? Like, why am I so triggered right now? Why am I so emotional? What's going on? And then I can pull some cards and be like, oh crap, yeah, that's what's going on. I need to release that. So tarot cards can absolutely be helpful. For me, I might do something like a ritual or something a little bit more extra if I really feel like I need an extra oomph and maybe I've been really struggling to get rid of a block. Now, if you're a person who really resonates with crystals and loves working with crystals, you can get crystals for block removal or even for protection. There's all sorts of them and there's all sorts of ways that you can work with them. But holding them, meditating with them, having them on your person as you go about your day, putting them under your pillow, anything like that, I think will actually help you remove the blocks. Again, if you believe that they do. With all of these things, I forgot to say, at the end of the day, you need to believe that it's going to work, because if you are going through the motion but you don't believe you can get rid of the block, you're not going to remove it. Like, that's just how it is. You have to trust and believe that it's not going to block you anymore. Now, getting creative is another way that you can remove blocks. So you can do automatic drawing, you can just draw in general, you can make music, you could do some art therapy, you could do some sound therapy. There's all sorts of ways that I think that getting creative actually helps you not only remove blocks, but also engage your psychic mind a little bit more. So it's like you're almost doing two things effectively at once. You're getting two birds with one stone. And I think doing creative things can absolutely help shift you out of the old way of thinking and into the new way of thinking. So sometimes if you don't necessarily want to deal with it directly and, art therapy really works for you, go ahead and try that. One of the things that you can also do to remove blocks is to call in your spiritual team. You can even ask a certain guide to show up to help you specifically with removing blocks. So just know that you're not alone in this. Your spiritual team is here to help you. They want you to be able to use your psychic abilities to communicate with them, or anybody in general, and they will absolutely help you if you ask. They might not remove the block for you, but they might point you in the right direction of what's going to help you. Now, the last thing that I think is incredibly helpful is just getting outside support. It's so helpful to be able to talk to like a friend or a fellow psychic when you're going through something, to get outside opinions. Now, just know that I have a Facebook group dedicated for people who want to engage their psychic ability and really push their psychic development. So you can join there, ask questions, and get help there. But you can also go in person to like your local metaphysical store. You can find a teacher or a colleague or a friend that you can trust to talk about these things. And just know too, you don't have to see intuitive people. Sometimes going to therapy alone can help with these things. I do feel like a lot of these things are probably things we need to be seeking help with anyways, and so therapists are really trained and really good at helping us with these things, counselors, and I feel like even if it's not exactly addressing your intuitive ability, I think that working on those things indirectly helps. So that's kind of a rapid fire of all the things that I like to use when I'm feeling blocked. There's more than this in my course if you want to check it out. But the important thing here is that just know that there's always going to be stuff. There's always going to be blocks that come up. You will not be completely rid of them. That's like being able to be superhuman and not let anything bother you ever. So don't like get down on yourself if you feel like you completely cleansed yourself. I don't think you can 100% do that anyway, because I think we're here living in these human bodies for a reason, and there's a reason why we're inhibited. That's my personal belief anyway. But I do think that blocks are something that's common and that we constantly have to work through. And just remember, the more power you give them, the harder it will be to get rid of them. So as a working psychic, I'm constantly having new things that I'm having to deal with. Sometimes I will take a week off. Sometimes I will do a little bit extra work around something that really needs some extra removal. Sometimes it's just as simple as me being like, you know what, I'm not going to let that bother me, but I'm constantly working on it. Ultimately, when you are constantly taking care of yourself as a healthy psychic, you are emotionally taking care of yourself, you are physically taking care of yourself, you are mentally taking care of yourself, and all of those things are keys to being a better psychic. And this is why I say that psychic work is like a full-time job. It's not just in the time that I show up for a reading. I'm having to do this work day to day, every day, so I don't let it influence my reading that's going to come up in a week. So like sometimes if I have like a really bad fight with my husband and I've got a reading the next day, you know, I have to like deal with it. I have to deal with those emotions and really try to set them aside and release them, maybe talk to my husband so I can at least feel temporarily a little bit better so that I can show up and be better for my reading. Again, if you don't have the luxury of doing that, you can always take a break. I talk about that a lot, again, in my course, and I'm a huge advocate for taking care of yourself first. Now, I feel like one of the things we don't talk about enough is preventing psychic blocks, and the biggest way you can do this is just by establishing a routine, a spiritual routine for yourself, figuring out what it is that you need every day to be on top of your game. And when I say on top of your game, I really just mean, you know, taking care of yourself to where you feel good. And, you know, for me, that is that I have to go to bed on time. I have to wake up at a certain time. I have to make sure that I read every night before bed. Sometimes it's meditating or journaling. Some people, it's like going on a walk or making sure they get that exercise or movement in for themselves. You have to have those things in order to be a healthy psychic tomorrow, if that makes sense. So to me, if you're struggling with feeling like you're a healthy psychic, start with your routine. Just remember, at the end of the day, you are ultimately responsible for removing these blocks. Nobody's going to come in and do it for you. Nobody's going to come and slap you and tell you, you know, stop saying that to yourself. You really have to do the work and identify it for yourself and then work towards fixing it. And again, remember that you can always remove them. This is not something that you don't have any control of. It's all just mental at the end of the day. And if you do this, you're going to catch these issues and these blocks as they come up. You'll be able to deal with them in the moment because you have a good established routine. You're prioritizing your health as a psychic, and then you'll be able to read more consistently, more effectively. You're going to get better, cleaner, clearer information. So again, if you want more information on how to remove blocks, check out my courses. I wanted to give you guys at least the foundation here, and then you can move on to other videos or again take the course to get more information. Thank you guys so much for watching. Remember to give this video a thumbs up if you found it helpful, and let me know what your favorite block removal technique is. Like, what's your go-to when you need to kind of like get yourself out of a funk? It might help somebody else in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in my next video. Bye.